part one of today's podcast, we're going to be talking to Regionally. Regionally is an investment service designed to connect investors with established businesses based in the UK outside of London. And we'll have Jim Odell, CEO at Regionally, joining us to tell us more. And then in part two, we'll be talking to Paul Newsham and Tony Backhouse at Chamber members RfM Accountants. RfM work with Regionally in Cumbria to provide a service which gets local businesses investment ready. But first, we'll go to Jim Odell to find out what is Regionally all about.
Well, Regionally really does fit what is currently, I think, still called a levelling up agenda. Very briefly, Justin Urquhart Stewart and I started this business 5-6 years ago. We came from a place where he was talking to businesses, particularly in chambers of commerce, who were struggling to raise capital as they were growing. The traditional sources weren't working for them, and they still don't, by the way. I came from it from a slightly different direction. I've run my own small and larger businesses, and I'm an ex-Accenture consultant, and I've got a lot of experience in the IT industry, and I coach chief executives of medium-sized businesses. So I kind of was seeing the same issues that Justin was. We came together, we invested heavily in a business, we invested in systems and software to automate the process of doing really just one thing, and that was to match high net worth individual investors, family offices and funds with businesses in the regions of the UK that needed that money. And the point is a simple one. If you're in London or the southeast in the kind of Cambridge, Oxford, London triangle, raising capital is comparatively simple, with the net result that of course it's also essentially more expensive for investors because there's more competition. So investors essentially pay more to invest in Cambridge than Cockermouth, to put it simply. So from an investor's point of view, this idea was attractive because it would enable them to see great growing businesses away from that high cost triangle. And it was obviously aimed at clients who may well be the kind of clients that are members of your chamber, who look to grow their businesses. So that was the background, and that's essentially what it's all about. The thing that I would add to it is that we don't just raise the capital. One of the things that was very clear was there was a need for advice, guidance, in particular the business of getting companies properly investment ready. And that doesn't just mean writing a good story. It's all about actually making sure they really are investment ready and have got the right resources, people, capital, organizational structure, governance. I mean, that's a big issue to a lot of investors. They want to know who the existing shareholders are. So there's a whole range of things that we now do on top of the basic business of matching investment with investee companies. We provide a whole range of services which in the Northwest are delivered by my friends Tony Backhouse and the rest of the team there. Okay?
Yes, and we'll be talking to Tony and Paul in the second half of the podcast about the Regionally way and how the RfM works with Regionally to get businesses ready, getting the investment story ready and all things like that. If I could just ask you another question just related to Regionally, it's about your investors. Who are your investors and where are they based and how do you get in touch with them, etc.?
There are broadly three groups. So first of all, they're high net worth individuals all around the UK and indeed the world, from all over the place. They're very often people who've run their own businesses, had a success, want to reinvest that money in another business which they understand. And typically that's true of UK-based investors. I could name you lots of them, but it would be unfair in an open podcast. But you would recognize their names. They've run very successful UK businesses. They've often sold them, or they've had extra external investment, and they've turned that capital into their own capital. So they are our first group, and they tend to want to be involved in their investments as well as just putting the money in. So they'll be interested in not just being a non-executive director, but perhaps giving some guidance and some support. So that's the first group. The second group is essentially family offices from all over the world. And we have one particular group of family offices based in Switzerland who are putting up some specific capital, which we're aimed at groups of clients around the UK. And they are co-investing alongside some public money as well. So we also talk to the local authorities in particular so far in Belfast, in Greater Manchester Council and West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So those three are good examples where they've got some capital and they're looking specifically to match funding alongside our family offices to meet the needs of a very specific group of investee companies. They're the ones that probably turn over less than £1 million and struggle to raise capital from the venture capitalists. The VCs tend not to do business with firms that are under 1 or 2 million turnover. And you can understand why. For them, it's an expensive process. Whereas we're set up to handle smaller businesses, younger businesses, who need the money just as badly and often in a more interesting position. So we focus on those businesses that look for, I don't know, between the least would be £250,000 and the most would be 10 million. It's that sort of group. And they're all growing businesses and they're attracted to those family offices and local authorities. And then finally, we do work with venture capitalists themselves. And there are several investments we've done where we worked either alongside them or alongside them and other public sector money. We've done it recently down in Cornwall, for example. So it's the match. We're in the business of matching investors within investee companies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. You mentioned that you've been working in Cornwall, and now you're looking to branch out into our region up here in Cumbria. What are the other regions that you've been investing in the UK?
So right now, our primary efforts are in West Yorks, in Greater Manchester and Lancashire, I guess, and Belfast. Those have been our focus. We've also had some, but not concluded yet, transactions in the northeast, in particular the Newcastle area. And of course, you can't ignore the fact that a very large number of businesses nowadays are effectively virtual. They don't have a manufacturing home necessarily, or a distribution home. We can kind of cheat a bit by doing business with someone in Pontefract who's got a distribution depot in Pontefract, but they might actually have a head office somewhere very distant. But that means the West Yorkshire District Council like the idea of investing in a company that has some footprint in their patch. So that's how we kind of get around the challenge of virtual businesses. But there are lots of them out there, as I'm sure you know.
So looking at next year with the upcoming general election and the potential change in government, how will the investment landscape change in your view? And what are the kind of challenges, opportunities that'll throw up?
Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of this at all, because clearly we all have different views. I think it's unlikely that much will change. I see no reason at all why, for example, if we had a Labour government, I think it's quite likely that they would want to invest in exactly the same way, in the same levelling up agenda. But they'll do it for different reasons. I'm going to be frank about it. There are a group of northern-based Tory MPs who became MPs in 2019, who frankly developed this agenda because they were worried about losing their seats in the kind of red wall seats that they acquired as blue wall seats in the northeast and around the Midlands and other places. I'm not sure that was necessarily the right reason for developing that policy. I think the right reason is the one that I suspect that the Labour Party will probably promote, although how effective it'll be, I don't know. That is that we want to try and get regional investors to match regional investment from the centre and from outside. And that's something that we recognise and have started to work on quite hard. So, for example, in Belfast, we're talking to a number of local investors in Ireland and Northern Ireland who want to invest alongside us. And they would recognise that they'll also be investing alongside perhaps some public sector money. That actually makes a lot of sense. It means that there's a genuine connection between those businesses that are trying to grow, and local investors who understand the marketplace and perhaps more importantly might even do business with these folk. So we're seeing more of that, and I think that that's what the Labour Party are more likely to go with. The one thing Justin and I would say, and we're not alone, nearly all the angel investors and others would say the same, we don't really need public money. What we need is tax breaks. It makes more sense to give us a tax break than to chuck treasury money at a business opportunity where they have no real understanding of what they're trying to do. But that's a personal opinion, if you like. Other people would say, no, we need that public money. But in the past, it's not done as much good as you might hope. I could go on, but I won't. It's simple to say, I think the change will be in style and approach rather than in content. I think, to be fair, to take a good example would be the Greater Manchester Council, which is a Labour-run city council. They have invested heavily in businesses that are based in their territory, that employ local people, that use local suppliers and develop their local community by not selling out to a distant business. So part of what the money is meant to do, and I think this is a good point from a Labour Party point of view, is it's stopping businesses growing up and going away.
Yeah, interesting points there. So just going back to regionally and what the business does, what can you offer to Cumbrian businesses that are in this bracket of in the turnover bracket that you recommend and are ready to take that next step?
So we have a fairly rigid process, but it's worth talking about the kind of background to the rigid process. You'll find out from my friends at R&T that they're in the business of making sure that companies are ready for investment. And we need to understand that, and we need to understand what that state of readiness is. But once we've got to the point that we've identified perhaps members of your chamber who can use capital to grow their business and grow it locally, who can use external equity, not just debt, but particularly equity as well, which will enable them to grow quicker and further, then we would really want to meet with them and understand what they're looking for. We need to understand their business model, and we really need to understand their market as well, because we've got access to a lot of highly experienced external specialists who understand particular markets or product types or investment structures, who can help small companies, which normally don't have any of those special skills, to help them to decide how best to expand and how best to develop their business. So part of what we do is getting people investment ready, but we also help with the broader business strategy. Let's make sure that if the money's made available, it's used in an effective long-term way rather than to meet an immediate short-term need. So I hope that explains what we do, and our approach is very straightforward. I guess we're looking at businesses who are seeking perhaps at least 250,000, maybe 500,000 or more, and they're seeking to scale up. They've got their business to a strong position. They've got good staff. They're in a position to grow. Those are the people that we can help, primarily with equity, but we can also provide a combination of equity and debt.
Just to finish, if any of our members are interested in getting in touch and working with you, would you recommend that they go through RfM first, or directly talk to you or Justin?
Be quite clear. Tony Backhouse and Paul is the director of my business as well. So they're closely aligned to our structures. What we have is a business that is aimed to provide services specifically in the Northwest, which is run by Tony and Paul. And we provide a central resource, which is FCA authorised, happens to be based in London, but it could be anywhere. In fact, we'll probably move it to Manchester, ironically. It kind of makes more sense for us anyway. The investment decisions are essentially made by me and an investment committee. We see lots of opportunities. The ones that get our maximum attention are the ones that come through our partners, like Paul and Tony, and they're really important to us because they understand you, and you can help us identify the right people to help as well. So we want to work with you if we can, and we're very much looking forward to meeting more of your members.
Excellent. Well, anyone who's interested should keep listening for part 2 of the podcast, where we'll be talking to RFM, Tony and Paul, about how businesses can work with them to get investment ready. But for now, Jim, Odell, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Okay, great to see you. Bye now.
Paul, I'll come to you for this first question. Can you just tell the listeners who are RFM and RfM Transform?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Joe. RfM is a firm of accountants based in the Northwest. We have a number of offices across the region. We've got offices in Barrow, Ulverston, Lancaster, which also covers Windermere, into the Fylde. We've got an office in the Blackpool area, Preston, and we're currently developing an office in Manchester. And we've also got a small satellite office in London. So what we have done as a firm of accountants, we do the normal compliance work, audit, tax, accounts, etc. But we've built onto the practice different offerings that will, in effect, help our clients. So, for example, we help clients with R&D, HR, legal services, corporate finance, which is fundraising. We also help with buying and selling businesses and general consultancy work. And part of that general consultancy work involves Tony Backhouse, who is part of what's called RfM Transform, which helps, clients with the R&D, the general consultancy, fundraising, and also, disposing and selling of businesses. So that, in effect, is where, Tony comes into the business. And part of that role is helping clients with things like accelerator programs and also getting them investor ready.
That's interesting. So, Tony, at what point did the RfM Transform start operating, and why did RfM decide to launch this part of the business?
So we started RfM Transform about 7 years ago now, and it was all really about supporting smaller businesses in achieving their growth ambitions, whether that's getting them access to funding through R&D tax credits, through finance, whether that's looking at their strategy and their processes and improving their way of working, or whether that's looking at what they're doing in terms of managing their people. So we've identified the key areas that smaller businesses see pressures around staffing and recruitment and things like that, or growing the business. And we've put together a set of services that will help those companies navigate the different challenges that they face.
What sort of businesses do you work with in the main?
We work with any kind of business, really. We work with manufacturing companies, distribution, retailers, professional services companies. We really work with anything which is badged as SME. And that's where our speciality is, in those smaller companies, helping them to move up the chain, if you like.
So we've been chatting to Jim from Regionally in the first half of this podcast episode. What will RfM be doing to support Regionally as it operates within Cumbria?
I think I'll answer that one, Joe. Basically, Regionally are an operation that are based in London, and part of their remit is to help with levelling up and trying to encourage investors, funds, etc., to move from the southeast into the regions. So that involves, things with the northwest, the northeast. They've established links or opportunities with Manchester Local Authority and the Leeds Local Authority. That's the initial bit. So the idea is then to roll that particular programme out into Cumbria, hence the conversation that we're having now. And that kind of link with Regionally has been developed with RFM Transform to help develop and push out that opportunity.
That's interesting, yeah. And so it's all about moving funding, well, not moving funding from the London and the Southeast, but making sure that funding is available to areas outside of London and the Southeast.
Yeah, that's correct, Joe. The whole intention is to try and help with the levelling up program, and part of that is obviously, as Tony mentioned, is a big part of it is actually getting people investor ready. So when these people do look at opportunities in the Northwest, for example, the companies that we actually put in front of them are ready and in a format that can accept the investors' money when it's made available.
Okay, so talking about getting businesses ready for investment, that leads us on to something that you call the Regionally Way. Can you talk a bit more about this, please, Tony?
Yeah, the Regionally Way, as Paul has just mentioned, is a way of working that supports businesses. One, in terms of getting them ready for the investment that they're going to receive, make sure that they know how they will spend that money, make sure they know what levers they need to pull to drive that in the right way. And really, it's about the development of a strategy for growth, understanding where they're taking the business, where the finance is needed, what things do they need to do, and the ways of governing the business. That has a number of benefits. It has some benefits to the company themselves, so they can get started quickly. But it also has benefits to investors, that they'll get some assurance that the funds are going to be used correctly. And also we'll get some visibility and transparency over how the business is performing whilst they're invested in it.
I think I read something in the notes somewhere about what you call the investment story. Could you talk a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so the investment story is really about a narrative about the business. It understands where the business has come from. So it has an explanation of what type of organization it is, whether it's a family-run business, what are the values and the key things that that business has in place, which it wants to keep going throughout all of these things. It's also supposed to be a way that will attract investors as well. So they're interested in what the story is, as much as the business and the financial return that they will get over time.
You're looking to play to the investors' interests, not just their financial interests. Is that correct?
That is key, I think. There will be some cases where we might look for a single investor who has a particular interest in a particular area, and matching those up will be part of that process too.
It's interesting. Paul, if I could just bring you in here on the other ways that RFM supports businesses to get them ready for investment.
Yeah, the other way that RFM helps people get ready for investment is actually by putting the financial systems and controls in place. One of the large drivers behind levelling up and trying to attract investors into the area is to try and address the lack of funding that's not available, I should say, from the normal or what were previously funding routes like the banks. So to help the clients achieve that, we need to get them in a position where they have a reporting structure, they have budgets, they have cash flows, projections, etc. So the investor has the financial information that they need initially to make the decision whether or not to invest, but then also after they've made that decision, there are systems and processes in place where there is a reporting structure that gives the investor the information as they go along.
Yeah, I was also going to say, one of the things about this, the Regionally Way, and how we intend to use this throughout RFM is really to be with the business over a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. And that might be providing consultancy support to help improve things, or also it might also be looking at non-exec directorships around governing and help steering the ship.
So that could either be as an offering to mm-hmm. the client, or it could be insisted upon by the investor to have somebody on the board, so they are the eyes and ears of the investor. Right. But having said that, the non-executive director that would be appointed would have to have some industry knowledge to help and assist that particular client. it wouldn't be a case of just putting somebody on the board who's going to sit there and collect a monthly fee, for example. They would have to make a positive contribution to help drive and develop and push that client forward, whilst also being the eyes and ears of the investor at the end of the day.
And would you choose that non-exec director or would the investor?
It will probably be chosen by the investor after putting a number of maybe CVs in front of them.
Yeah.
And also, the key is working together and its personalities as well. So it'd be matching the investor to a non-executive director that he could work with, but also that the client could work with as well. There's no point really putting somebody into that particular role if it's going to cause friction, because then that creates negative energy and doesn't achieve anything positive. It's got to be, bought in on all sides, or it won't actually work.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like a really great offering for businesses. Tony, how should companies get in touch if they want to find out more about the Regionally Way?
Yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch to learn more about what we're doing, then they should contact either Paul or myself. Paul can be contacted at pnewsham@rfm-more.co.uk. I'm tbackhouse at rfm-more.co.uk, and we can get the team together in order to serve you and see whether you're a good fit for the program and whether we can add benefit to your business.
Great. Thanks a lot for being on the podcast today, gents.
Thank you.
Right.